Our next speaker is Jim Stoker. He's with Firearm Owners Against Crime, Institute for Legal, Legislative, and Education Action. Thank you, Jim, for being here.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Many of you know me, some of you may not. My name is James Stoker with Firearm Owners Against Crime, based out of Pittsburgh. I'm here before you today to discuss something a little different for me. Normally when I come see you, obviously it's about gun rights, Second Amendment issues, and things of that nature. This is more about process. So in discussing the process, I'm going to try to remove my own personal feelings towards the legislation that we currently have, legislation we've been working on, and try to focus on things that we can do moving forward that will make the system a little more approachable for everybody and hopefully more efficient. One of the things that's most difficult, especially hearing some of the, for lack of a better term, testimony here today about issues in the past, is a lot of these issues are emotionally charged, and rightly so. That's difficult to separate from the process. Something that my organization runs into quite frequently in testimony before the judicial committees and whatever other committees we sit in front of is the emotionally charged testimony. A lot of this testimony is lacking in fact or statistic, and sometimes those emotional comparisons that come into those committees aren't necessarily valid to help you do what you determine you need to do legislatively, and that's facts, right? We want to operate in reality. We don't want to operate in best case scenarios or what we hope will happen. We have to operate based on what we believe will happen. In doing so, it's hard to separate those feelings, especially on topics such as you have today. Now, part of the goal of my organization is also opposing crime. The crime statistics across Pennsylvania obviously are not getting any better. As a 28-year veteran in law enforcement myself, trust me, there's nothing more frustrating than going into a court in Allegheny County. One of the things that we would hope to see the committee here take into consideration for moving forward within the House is how the things you've already done matter. We have certain laws that are out there to protect victims of sexual offenses. We have victims for violent crime that are out there. We have mandatory sentencing for certain violations that are routinely discarded or bypassed by the courts. So these bills were passed into legislation by the honorable representatives here and some of your predecessors, but they're not being acted upon, and that's a problem. I mean, you've passed a law for a reason representing the Commonwealth, representing the people within the Commonwealth, and then the courts and the district attorneys discard what they will. For an example, and this is luring back to my organization's original agenda, of course, is preemption. So preemption was a big move in Pennsylvania. It was to restrict the ability of some of the, for lack of a better term, fiefdoms. We have townships, municipalities, and cities that want to enact legislation on their own that is in violation of the state law. But when these things happen, the district attorneys in those counties or those regions choose not to prosecute because of the politics involved. So you have these little fiefdoms out here of town councils and city government that want to pass their own laws or ordinances in their district. However, they're in violation of the law that this legislature created. In doing so, there's no repercussion. There's nothing that happens to them. What happens is an organization like mine, a grassroots organization, has to step up with our own funding from the citizens of the Commonwealth to fight against the taxpayer money, which is also our own money. You have the city of Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Philadelphia all doing these things, where they have countless attorneys presented in court to step up with the funding that they've been provided by our own tax money to fight against the law that you passed on our behalf. Our tax money fights our tax money, and then we have to donate from our own pockets to overcome that. Now, that's not just in preemption, it's just a classic example of a statute that gets ignored. So the question is, how would we fix these things? What could you do as a legislature to fix some of these problems? What we would propose is fairly simple. It's difficult to find a bipartisan objective here. But if you look at what gets argued a lot when we talk about the gun violence, right, the lack of a better term, myth of the term gun violence, why aren't we concerned about all violence? Should we not, as Pennsylvanians, be concerned about all violent crime? Should we not worry about everyone that is a victim of a crime? So rather than separate and say that these are separate issues, let's address the root of the problem. If we're going to use the term gun violence, and we're going to say that 33,000 people a year die to gun violence, let's look at the root of that and say, well, 22,000 of those are suicide. How can we address the mental health issue? We're never going to agree on gun violence or gun control. We're pretty well divided in the state on that. So how do we agree on the idea that people need mental health care? We used to have a very robust mental health system in Pennsylvania. That's gone. That doesn't exist anymore. Why don't we take some of the funding that we've wasted arguing about gun control and reinvest it into the mental health community? Let's take that money and provide funding for people that are in need of care so that it's not a black flag hanging over their head if they do seek help. Let's find a way to put the institutions back out there and professionals back in the market. Not just the idea that if you have a mental health need, well, we'll put you up in a condo over in this nice apartment complex so you can live amongst the rest of us, and you'll be fine there as long as we pay the minimum wage to a social worker. That's not how the system succeeds. But we've been failing at this routinely, and nobody wants to make the change. You folks are in a position to make that change, simply by following up on a lot of the things that you've already started. We have to sometimes set aside the end result of gun control versus gun rights and look at what's in the middle. If we're going to address violence, we're going to address mental health issues, then let's address those issues minus the polarizing effect of the statutes that maybe the left side agenda wants or the right side agenda wants. Let's look for the actual cause. Crime is the issue, not the tools of the criminal. If I sit there and I take away a gun from a bad individual who got it illegally, guess what? He's going to go get another one. And if he doesn't stop with that, it's going to be a knife or a hammer or an axe. I'm the one that's answering those calls. I go pick up the pieces. I'm telling you the tool doesn't matter. The damage is just the same. The family has a loss. The individual has a wound. The world has lost a soul. One way or the other, the end result is the same. So why are we arguing about how it happens? Can we not argue about what to do to stop it from happening in the first place? Why do the courts continue to allow people out that should be locked in prison? Are we worried about their feelings, or are we worried about what's safe for society? The highest percentage of violent crime are the same people over and over and over again. They're not new faces. And yet we don't take the time to incarcerate those more violent criminals. We don't do the things that we should be doing to protect society from those individuals. Recently, we had to arrest a fellow, talk about sex offenses, indecent contact with his own 12-year-old daughter. The district attorney told me I'm not allowed to take him to jail. I have to take him home where his 12-year-old daughter is. Does that sound like a solution for her? So why are we not addressing the failure in the court system to prevent crime? If we're going to continue to say, well, we're going to go after the tools, we're going to go after the methodology of how they kill themselves, how they kill others, why aren't we stopping the killing in the first place? Why does it matter what the tool is? And this is something that's well within the power of the legislature. You control somewhat, I agree, the reins of what happens in the court system by passing these statutes. So we passed a statute, there are mandatory minimums for certain types of violence. Correct, everybody agrees. Why don't we enforce that? Why are the courts allowed to trade that away, the district attorneys allowed to trade that away? I've been in law enforcement 28 years. I've never seen a 5-year mandatory on a gun crime, ever, make it through court. It's the first thing traded away. The defense attorneys don't want it. The prosecutors don't want to fight in court because of the money and the time it ties the courts up for. So let's trade that away. That statute became irrelevant the minute it was left to someone's discretion. So these are things that can be fixed, but they have to be fixed legislatively. It's a difficult task. You have to take on the judicial system. I don't think anybody wants to do that, but it's what needs to be done. So let's fix what's there. And the political grandstanding has to stop. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, we all know there are countless bills that get put. This week, if you've been paying attention to what's been put forth in the Senate, where do they come up with these ideas? The idea is to get votes. They're actually writing bills with the idea that folks are going to vote for them if they put this bill forth, not because it's going to succeed. They don't care if it's going to succeed or not. Is it going to raise funds from this organization or that organization? Is it going to succeed? Is it something that can actually pass? If not, then why are we wasting time on it? Let's at least make it so that it's something debatable, something close. There are folks out there that honestly believe that an assault weapons ban is going to change society. Anybody that's done the facts, looked at the statistics, knows that that is going to have zero impact on crime in Pennsylvania. The history proves it. We went through this in the 90s. It's a failed idea. It's a feel-good measure, but you still have senators and representatives that put this forth weekly, if not monthly. I know because I review the legislation every morning. This morning alone, there were 8 bills that came through the Senate, the House, both state and local, that are about gun control. Half of them will never make it out of committee. The other half, I'll be surprised if anybody seriously believes they're going to work. But these are things that we need to work on. This is part of the process that can be fixed. And I can sit here and argue pros and cons of gun control or my beliefs or other folks' beliefs. That doesn't do you any good. So the focus was on what the process is. I think what we have to do is, when these bills come forth, if they're serious bills, if people believe they have a chance, we need to change the way we amend them. If you look through some of the bills that we've tried to push forth on either side of the argument, they get buried in amendments. Well, let's change it to read this and change it to read that, to where it no longer represents what it was initially started as. And I'll be honest with you, my organization, we're just as guilty of it as everybody else, because it's part of the system and it's something we know we can use to our advantage. If we lose sight of what the original bill was, then what was the purpose of having it written in the first place? Let's go to our representatives and approach you and say, this is the bill we need. We don't need to change what's currently on the floor. So maybe find a way to restrict the way these bills get amended so they can't be amended into basically uselessness. So the last thing I will leave you with, the process that I've seen, trying to read the rules that you folks have to obey in the House, it beats anybody down. I don't know how you follow half of them. I've read them all. I won't say I understand them. And I think that's a very difficult and complex topic. I understand that's something that you are all here to address. But I will leave you with the words of Ben Franklin, and this is written on the wall right outside of the building you come and go from every day. And that is, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. And I think that's something we would all do well to remember. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.